So let's look at some learning activities for the planes of movement topic. This is of course part of Unit 2 Functional Anatomy and specifically is related to the anatomy of the muscular system. So what I'd like you to do is by all means use the diagrams on the left to guide you, but see if you can watch this sporting action and determine what plane the movement is occurring in and about what axis. So have a little think, look at the diagrams. We've got a backward somersault. Hopefully you saw that the backward somersault involved our Tom Daly rotating in the sagittal plane and about the transverse axis. Have a look at this example. So we've got a cartwheel. Use the diagrams, what plane and what axis. Hopefully you saw that the cartwheel movement was occurring in the frontal plane and about the sagittal axis. Last one, pause the video and have a look at this once I've shown you this movement. It's a little video clip. It's a spinning roundhouse kick. So pause the video, have a look at the diagram on the left, see if you can pick out which plane and which axis the spinning roundhouse is done in. So hopefully you saw that this spinning roundhouse kick movement was in the transverse plane, the rotating plane, and about the longitudinal axis. So a task for you now to apply your knowledge of planes and axes. What you're going to do is you're going to obviously use your knowledge and understanding that planes and axes are paired. You're going to make sure that when you describe your sporting action that you refer specifically to the joint that the movement is occurring in. So ultimately what you've got to do is find 3 sporting images. I've picked 2 out over here as my examples. You're going to find 3 sporting images and you're going to explain the main movement that's occurring, at what joint that movement's occurring, and in which plane and axis that movement is occurring. So let's look at my 2 examples there. I've got a discus thrower up here, and so my example would be something along the lines of the discus throw is rotation of the torso, so the rotating spinning action of the torso in the transverse plane and about the longitudinal axis. My free throw action here. So my free throw action is extension, that's the movement, at the elbow joint in the sagittal plane and about the transverse axis. So you've got to find 3 of your own sporting images and write a sentence much like I did to specifically analyse one action from your image. The next task for you to do is to analyse this image here. So this image demonstrates a standing squat or a squat from the standing position. What you've got to do is look at the limbs, which is the appendicular skeleton, the limbs, the arms and the legs, and you've got to analyse what's going on at the hip, the knee and the ankle joint only. I've just asked you specifically to look at those. And the movement is from standing to the squat, so the lowering phase of a squat. So when the lowering action is happening, what's happening at the hip, knee and ankle joint? So you've got to establish what each of those, what type of joint it is. You've got to write here the articulating bones at that joint. So what bones make up the knee joint? What bones make up the ankle joint? I've given you some examples to help guide you as well. So the hip is made up of the femur and the pelvis. You've then got to specify during the downward phase what movement is occurring at each of those joints. Again, I've given you flexion at the knee joint, you're bending your knee, you're reducing the angle at that joint in the lowering phase. You've got to determine what movement's happening at the hip and the ankle. And then, of course, for each of those 3 joints, you've got to state what plane of movement the movement is occurring in and what axis the movement is rotating around or moving around. So basically, create this table, fill it in for the downward phase of a squat. Now what I'd like you to do, having gone through my example question, I'd like you to create an exam question of your own, because that previous task was linked to a exam question. So you're going to create 2 exam questions of your own. Use the same table format. It keeps it nice and clear and simple. You've got to obviously create your own answers, your mark scheme. So you're going to decide on 2 images or 2 exercises. It's helpful to have an image sometimes. You're going to decide on the joints that you're going to use, but I'm going to say that you can't use the 3 I already have. So you can't use the hip, the knee, or the ankle. Okay, so you would write a question on an image, on an action, on a skill, or on a movement, and you would say what 3 joints you're going to analyze, but it can't be the hip, the knee, or the ankle. You're going to do that twice for 2 different types of action or 2 different images. Make sure, of course, you've got an answer version so you know the answers.